When you create a pivot table in Excel, the program shows a number of pivot table elements by default. You can show, hide, or in some cases move those elements to change the pivot table configuration to your liking. I'll demonstrate how to work with your pivot table's configuration in this movie. My sample file is configure0105, and that is a sample file. You can find it in the Chapter 1 folder of the Exercise Files collection. On this worksheet, I have a pivot table that summarizes category sales by year. On the ribbon, you can see that we have pivot table tools displayed on the title bar of the workbook, and then underneath that we have the Analyze contextual tab and the Design contextual tab. Also, at the right side of the screen, you can see the pivot table fields task pane. If I were to click any cell outside of the pivot table, in this case I'll click F3, but it could be any cell that's not part of the table, then all of those elements disappear because the pivot table is not active. If I click any cell within the pivot table, then they come back. Anytime you're working within a pivot table, the pivot table tools contextual tabs Analyze and Design will appear on the ribbon. However, you can, if you want, hide the pivot table fields task pane. There are a couple of ways to do that. One is to go over to the task pane itself and click its Close button, and that will close it. I hide the pivot table field list task pane whenever I'm explaining a point and I don't need to pivot my pivot table for a while. And also, if the data inside of the pivot table extends far enough to the right that it's blocked by that task pane, then I'll hide it for the moment. If you want to bring it back, you can go to the Analyze contextual tab of the ribbon. And then if you look in the Show group at the far right, you'll see that Field List is the top item. So click that button, and the task pane comes back. There are a number of other things you can do with the task pane. If you click its down arrow on the title bar, you'll see a number of options. And here you can move, size, or close it. Closing does what I just showed you by clicking the Close button. If you want to size it, then you can click it, and you'll see that you can drag left or right, and pressing the Escape key ends that mode. And finally, if you want to move it, you can click Move, and that allows you to move the pivot table fields task pane around on the screen. The way that my recording software interacts with this program means that I can't actually move it, but you'll see that the mouse pointer has changed to a 4-way pointing arrow. That means that you can click and drag the title bar of the pivot table fields task pane and move it around the screen. And again, when you have it in the place you want, you can press Escape and you get out of that mode. Finally, you can go to Tools, click Tools, and you can change how the pivot table fields task pane is laid out. There are a lot of options here, so I will leave you to experiment with them. You'll notice in the Show group on the Analyze tab of the ribbon that there are 2 other items that you can turn on or off. And those are the Show and Hide Detail buttons, which are called the plus and minus buttons also, and field headers. If we look over in the body of the pivot table, we'll see that we have row labels and column labels. Those are the field headers. And if you click the filter arrow that's associated with them, then you're able to act on either the row or the column data. If you want to hide these field headers, then you can click the Field Headers button here to deselect it, and they go away. So that means that you don't have the filter arrows that you had before. Clicking field headers, of course, will bring them back. The other option available to you is to turn on or off the Show or Hide Detail buttons. And those are the buttons that you'll see here, which look like a plus sign, or if you click that plus sign, then you'll see that it changes to a minus sign. Those are Show and Hide Detail. So plus means you want to show more detail. In this case, we want to quarter. And minus means you want to show less detail or hide details. So if I were to click the Hide Detail button for the year of 2017, it hides the quarter data and instead aggregates everything at the year level. If you want to hide those buttons, you can go to the Show group and click the Show Hide Detail buttons button to deselect it, and they go away. And of course, if you want to bring them back, just click again, and there they are. The Pivot Table Fields task pane, Expand and Contract buttons, and field headers are all useful pivot table components, but you don't have to use them. If you want to remove them from your pivot table's current view, you can do so by using the controls on the Analyze Contextual tab of the ribbon.